Hi, I'm glad you could join me for Session 4, Technology and Reading Development, and also using non-print text with ELs. Today, you're going to get started by watching a video about why is technology important in education. And then you're going to take a look at what happens in 1 second on the internet. How many tweets are there? How many Instagram posts? How many gigabytes of data are transmitted? How many emails? Check it out. It is mind-boggling. Then you're going to take a look at some of our reading and resources. So read these in the order because they kind of build on each other. And then I want you to take a look at this infographic about adapting text, because in the slides we're going to talk a lot about adapting text, and then that is going to be your technology application product today. And then I want you to browse the non-print text matrix. At the end of the session, we're going to touch on non-print text a little bit, and so it'll be really helpful if you have this in the back of your mind as we talk about that. You're going to watch the Session 4 video. You can reference the slides during the video or after the video. Once you've read the resources, watch the video, you're going to do your technology application product, and that is using or creating an adapted text. So you're going to create an adapted text that has at least 3 levels to support students at different ELP levels. You can present it in any way you'd like: Google Slides, Google Docs, Word, PowerPoint, infographics, digital book creators, anything else I forgot. The text doesn't have to be long, but I would try adapting a text that you're going to actually use with students so that it's beneficial for you. Once you're done with your text, you're going to link it in our adapted text library, and you're going to reflect on the process of creating the adapted text and the tool you use to create it. So that's going to be Session 4 in a nutshell. Here's an outline of your graded activities that I just went over, and then more about HyperDocs if you're interested. So now we are ready to take a look at Session 4, Technology and Reading Development. As with the last session on oral language, in this session we're not going to go really deep into the theory and research behind reading development for ELs, because that's covered in other courses in the endorsement sequence. What we're really going to focus on is how can we take technology to enhance what we already know about good reading instruction for ELs. So how this session is going to be structured is we're going to go through the 10 anchor standards in the Common Core, and we are going to see how can we take technology tools to help meet those standards and what strategies can be used. So let's dive in. The first set of standards are key idea and detail standards. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So Anchor 1 is read closely to determine what the text says explicitly and to make logical inferences from it. Cite specific textual evidence when writing or speaking to support conclusions from the text. So right here we can see that for literature, that anchor looks like asking and answering questions about the text. For informational texts, that anchor standard is making logical inferences. So how can we help our ELs do that with technology? So one of the tools we can use is Google Arts and Culture. We talked about that in the last session, and we're going to talk about it at the end of today's session, but you can get so many visual images there to help students practice making inferences and citing details in a text. It just happens to be a non-print text if it's art or music or something of the sort. The other thing that is in here that I'll let you look at on your own is determining how much background knowledge to provide for ELs. That seems to be a bit of a debate, especially when you're talking about close reading. Like, do you give it to them cold so they have no background, so they know what it feels like to know nothing and struggle? Or do you give them some background so they have practice connecting things to their own experiences? So that article talks a little about it. You can read it on your own if you'd like. My opinion is that our ELs know what it feels like to not know what's going on in a text. They don't need extra practice at that. They know how that feels. So if we can help them to start recognizing connections and making those connections and giving them some of that background that they need to be at the same, to have the same background knowledge as their monolingual English peers, then it's beneficial to them. But I'll let you read the article. Okay, so semantic mapping. This tool is called Coggle, and it's coggle.it, and this is an example one I did. So Coggle is like a mind map, but it's collaborative. So it's kind of like a Google Doc mind map. And you can collaboratively work with someone to make a mind map here. So I have made one about magnets, so I can see I gave different characteristics of magnets. They're different shapes. They stick together. And then I gave, if I'm an EL, I'm not going to be wanting to, I may not be able to put a lot of text, let's say. Or as the teacher, I may want to stick to a more visual semantic map to help students understand. So when I say stick together, I want to see things sticking together with magnets. And I want to see them have a North Pole and a South Pole like here. So that is, Coggle is a great tool to kind of help students map out how things are connected in their brain. Anchor 2 is determining central ideas or themes of a text and analyzing their development, summarizing the key supporting details and ideas. In literature, it's story retelling and summarizing, and in informational text, it's identifying and summarizing key themes and supporting details. So how do we practice that? So I have one activity that I call Picture the Main Idea. And it's really easy. You take a picture and you ask them, what is the main idea of this? Now, who is really uncomfortable by this activity is adults, because there's no text, and we rely so much on text to find main idea. And in our heads, text and main idea are so intertwined that it's hard to break that cycle of thinking. Students tend to be a little bit more flexible in their thinking. So if I were to ask you, what's the main idea of this picture? What would you say? Here's what some other people have said. The main idea is women are riding bicycles. And then their story details were, it's a sunny day, so they're both wearing shorts and t-shirts. They are riding next to a beach. The weather is warm, so they seem to be hot. Now, would I want to say there is sand? Is that the most important thing in this picture? No. But sometimes when we tell students, when they think of a main idea, we say, is that the most important part of the text? Well, if they said that, then yeah, they probably think it is, because sometimes it's hard for them to picture what's happening in the text. So because they don't have that mental picture, they're having trouble practicing this skill. If we can have students practice this skill with a picture, finding the most important thing in the picture, and then finding details to support that, that is going to build that main idea and detail identification skills so that when they get to the text, that muscle is much stronger. So any way we can have them practice main idea in detail is going to benefit them. Okay. The next strategy in Anchor 2 is summarizing news videos. So this link will take you to the best news websites for students from Common Sense Education, and they have videos for all different ages of kids, but they're all reputable. And what's nice about having students summarize newscasts, number one, has visual support to the text, but newscasts are already summaries of big events. So it's already kind of pared down the information, and so they can really pick out the most important details from there. And then we can practice citing by, if they claim something happened, say, okay, show me the minute and second where that happened in the video. And then we can tie that when we get to text to, all right, show me where it says it in the paragraph, right? Always going back and referencing whether it's a video or text. And then finally, the next thing you're familiar with is Edpuzzle. And Edpuzzle can be great for summarizing, or rather summarizing and predicting. So in this video, and you can go through and play it through on your own if you'd like. It's about a man who pretends to steal his own bike in New York City to see if anybody will stop him. And so he tries it 3 times. And before each attempt is done, I stop the video and say, do you think anyone's going to stop him? And then students have to say yes or no and why. And then after the video, we say, what happened? Or after the event, what happened? Did anyone stop him? Yes or no, and why not? So we're practicing predicting, we're practicing summarizing after the prediction. So Edpuzzle is a really nice tool to do that because it gives us that opportunity to stop the video and have students process and write something down. Anchor 3 is analyzing how and why individuals, events, or ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. In literature, that looks like identifying story elements and analyzing the relationship to story events. And in informational text, it's analyzing cause and effect. So one way we can analyze how and why individuals, events, or ideas develop is to create a graphic representation of a text. And this is something I'm going to cover more in depth a little bit later. And I'm going to show you this example. But for instance, if I'm trying to understand a text, like this elements of biography, and I'm an EL, this might be really dense and hard for me to process how it looks. However, if, as a teacher, I can turn it into an infographic that has visual support for the student, then the student's going to be so much more able to recall that information and understand it later because they can see it visually. So that semantic map is a lot stronger. The other 2 links, Canva and Piktochart, are places where you can create infographics. And this video takes you to a video, this link takes you to a video on how to create timelines in Canva. I love Canva because it's a free graphic design tool for people who are definitely not graphic designers. And I am definitely not a graphic designer. But it's very easy. Students can use it. And you can create some really beautiful, clean, and clear timelines that can show the development of an event. And then when you have that development of an event laid out, the precursor, the event, what happened after, you can analyze how things interacted over that timeline. But first you need to have that timeline established. And for ELs, it's so important to have them be able to see that visually. And if they can create it themselves, it's even better. Next, we're going to move on to the craft and structure anchor standards. And the first one there is interpreting words and phrases as they're used in a text, including determining technical, connotative, and figurative meanings, and analyzing how specific word choices shape meaning and tone. This is definitely a difficult anchor standard for students, especially for ELs, because they didn't grow up hearing English words, so they don't have that natural understanding sometimes of what a word means, or if it kind of means that, or doesn't mean that, or technically means that but doesn't feel right. So sometimes we have to be really explicit with how things are related and how words are related and why specific shades of meaning were chosen and how that all shapes meaning. So one way we can do this is with a visual dictionary web. So there's 2 really cool websites that I like for this. One is GraphWords, and that's this one. And GraphWords shows you how words are connected. So here's the word plan. Any of the light blue ones it's connected to nouns. Orange is adjectives, green is verbs, purple is adverbs. And so you can you can see the discussion or description rather here. And so we can see some popular words. So if I look at love, here are all the verbs related to love, right? Love is a verb. Here's love as a noun. Another love is a verb. If we go back, we can take a look at the word color. The verbs and the nouns for color. You can also type in a word, but this is really helpful in helping students to see shades of meaning to see how words interact. It's also really helpful if you're trying to get students to broaden their vocabulary. We all know in stories, students say, he felt sad, he felt happy. Well, if I don't want to see the word happy anymore, just saved it, there we go, then I might do this. That is not as great as I thought it was going to be. But you can go through and check. Now let's say I type in happy, I'm not happy with it. Let's take a look at it, another one. Let's take a look at snappywords.com, which does the same thing, but has a lot more description when it comes to how words are related. So here is the word happy and all the words it's related to. So it has nouns, verbs, adjective, adverbs, but also just a lot more ways to relate words to each other. So another great way for students to see how words are connected and also expand their vocabulary. Let's take a look at the next example, which is visual displays of word relationships, which seems like it is what we just talked about, but it's a little bit different. So in this one, we're going to use a word cloud to figure out how word relationships are happening, and are there themes or trends related to words in a text. So I have this really exciting text called A New Kind of Library, and I'm sure it's very nice, but it's probably not one students would generally gravitate towards. So what I might do is, if this is the text that I have to read with my students, or we have to read about this library or this topic, I'm going to say, like, okay, I need to figure out how to introduce this to them. How do they see any trends in the word choice? So what we can do is highlight a text, copy, and then go to wordsift.org and paste. And then I'm going to sift. So now I see a word cloud for that text. And I'm actually going to change the style to something that looks a little easier for me. So a word cloud works as follows. If the more frequently a word appears in a text, it will show up bigger in the word cloud. So library was there 30 times. If a word is small, like main, that means it appeared fewer times. So we can see website appeared only 2 times, as opposed to information 11 times. So right away, even before I read this, if I'm a student, I can start to gather some information about the text, figure out what's going on, what's the main idea, what do we think is the most important thing in this text, and we can start to make those connections before we even read it. Another thing we can do is we can look at this informational text interpretation of Anchor 4, which is determine meaning of words and phrases. I can look at my word cloud and say, like, let's pretend I don't know what information means. Now I have a whole lot of words around it that can help me start to piece that information together and start to build my understanding of that word. So seeing how these words interact is really helpful. Okay, let's take a look at that same text, A New Kind of Library. A few things I do want to point out. When we're talking about reading and technology, it's important to know, like, where are your easy places to go if you need to get leveled readers. ReadWorks is free to join, and a lot of their texts now have leveled versions. So if you need leveled text of some of these, you may be able to find it right here. Now, the other thing it has is vocabulary support, has question sets, There's a lot of things in ReadWorks that they're adding to all the time. Sometimes they're adding ELL vocabulary support. Sometimes they're adding other kind of visual support for ELs and audio support for ELs. So really take the chance and go through, or take the time and go through and see if there's any new features to different websites that may help you and your students out. Okay, so again, let's go back to a new kind of library. I'm going to reopen it. So let's say, okay, I open this and I say, all right, my students probably won't be able to understand a whole lot of this. I know them, I know their English language proficiency levels. This is not going to be great. So I, again, copy the text. But now I'm going to go to a website called Text Compactor. And I'm going to slide this all the way over to 100. So I want to say this is 100% of the text I have. Okay? All this library, good stuff. Then I'm going to drag the slider. Let's go to 50. And here we go. It has leveled and simplified my text for me. So instead of saying the first libraries were made thousands of years ago, it now says the first libraries were made thousands of years ago. They were owned by kings. Later, there were libraries and buildings where people led religious lives. So here it took out the part about kings and left that. So it's making choices. I may agree, I may not agree. What's important to remember is that there's not a teacher in a closet somewhere who quickly read the story about a new kind of library and typed this up real fast. This is a robot. A robot did this. So it may get things wrong, it may get things right. It doesn't know my students, it doesn't know their ELP levels, it doesn't know what I want them to know. It doesn't know the vocabulary or the syntax I want us to practice. So after it's simplified, it's important you go in and make sure it suits your need. But we can also keep going. Maybe I have some students who are real new, and this is going to allow them to participate in the discussion or in the content, but at an access point that they can get to. And so I am not about letting machines do all the work because I think they make mistakes often, but I am about letting, using tools to get jump starts on doing work that would otherwise take hours. So Text Compactor is a great way to kind of get a jump start on leveling text. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Okay. So just as a quick game, what text do you think this word cloud came from? Any guesses? If you guess the Gettysburg Address, you're right. And you can take a look at it down here. Okay, here's Anchor 4 still. So how can we interpret those words and phrases as they're used in the text? Another way we can do it is by putting a text spin on a classic strategy, the Freyer model. And so if you're familiar with the Freyer model, you know it looks something like this. Definition, facts and characteristics, use it in a sentence, examples or illustrations, and here's the word. So this teacher has made a Google slide deck for each vocabulary word. So here's the template that you can borrow, and here's student samples. So we can see this is their math sample, and so the students contribute and add to this, and then they all have access to it at school, at home, whenever they need to kind of look up a word and see the definition or examples or how it's used. Okay, another example, we have digital vocabulary notebooks, and this is a 5th grade example, and these are collaborative as well, so it's the same unit but different groups. So we can see how the different groups interpreted the same vocabulary words. So unit 2, should everyone be included? Here are the words. And so these students aren't following a Freyer model, but they're still putting a word, part of speech, definition, and a picture to illustrate what it means. So these are things that you could do all together as a class and have a class vocabulary notebook, things students can do individually or collaboratively in groups. Another thing we can do is have students practice captioning things, right? And captions don't seem pretty fun, usually, right? In the newspaper or in books, textbooks, they're not really glamorous. But if we turn them into like meme captions, they become super fun for students. So think of that text spin on something to kind of use words in a different shade of meaning. So last winter, someone used me as a snowball. Why did we make these word choices? Why did someone pick this picture to go with those words? We can talk about all of the meaning of tone and word choice and meaning, and really have a good discussion on that with students with just one picture. Anchor 5 is analyzing the structure of text, including how specific sentences, paragraphs, and larger portions of text relate to each other in the whole. So we touched on this a little bit before about how things relate to each other and timelines, and that link will take you to timeline tools and a graph that kind of shows you the pluses and minuses and features of different timeline tools. So you can look and say, if I'm looking to use a timeline tool with students at this grade for this reason, and I need it to be free, this chart is going to help you kind of narrow down to the best timeline tool to use. Anchor 6 is assessing how point of view or purpose shapes the content and style of a text. So a few resources I really like to hit these kind of goals of distinguishing point of view from various characters as well as their own, and understanding point of view is to really start to see how different people live and what different people think. Students are egocentric, or children are egocentric rather. It's normal developmentally, and so it's hard for them sometimes to see different perspectives because they only know their experience. So we need to expose them to other people's experiences. And one great site for that is Larry Ferlazzo. He is an ELL guru and a tech guru, so he's kind of right in our wheelhouse right now. And his website is fantastic, and he has literally thousands of these the best of blank lists. And even though it says 2009, he updates it constantly, so it's now like 10 years of stuff. And so if I want to help my students understand what it's like to walk in someone's shoes, understand their perspective, I can go here and look for something that's going to help me. So I might say, and I know somewhere in here, and I'm not sure if I'll find it immediately. So in here are like, how do 30 different children's bedrooms, or how do bedrooms across the world, school lunches across the world. What does when we say ruff ruff for a dog in English, what does that sound like in another language? It's really all levels of getting different perspectives of things. So you can see here is what reading looks like when you're dyslexic. We can see, trying to find those. Oh, the immersion film is very good. So in here, I probably just rolled right past it, but there's really great resources in here to help students just be exposed to different perspectives, because they can't compare different perspectives if they don't know what those other perspectives are. And he also has a site about, or a page about, the best sites for learning about other cultures. And as soon as that loads, this might be struggling today. Well, there we go. So Culture Crossing tells information about different countries. This has articles and photos from different countries, celebrations around the world, clothes around the world. Here's school lunches around the world. These are great ways for students to just see other people's experiences and perspectives so that they can start to compare them and see how they're different from their own. Another idea, in the last session we talked about making videos, is have students create videos or take pictures from different perspectives. And I mean different perspectives literally. And I had this idea because in this class one time, a teacher for one of the tech tools in her final project created a video with WeVideo and a tablet. And she actually just gave the tablet to a student and said, carry this around with you all day, and I want to just film your day. And what she was most surprised about when she looked at the video clips was just how short the student was. She goes, I decorate my room for my height. I see my room from my height. I interact with the school from my height. I never thought about what it looked like from a student down there. And it looks different. And so even just that realization for an adult was really, life-changing for her, and it really made her rethink a lot of the things she did. So how would that be for students if we had them see the world through a different perspective? Now we're going to go to integration of knowledge and ideas. And that anchor standard is number 7. Integrate and evaluate content presented in diverse media and formats, including visually and quantitatively, as well as in words. We've really been doing that this whole session. So I'm only going to point out a few things. Use audiobooks consistently. Listening to audiobooks is a valid and important form of reading. Students need to build this skill. We can't never have them listen to things and then say, I can't believe they're such bad listeners, right? We need to help them build that skill, and audiobooks is a way to do it. And you don't have to buy them or go crazy or, have tons of those little bags with cassette tapes or CDs in them. One option is Storyline Online. That's really been being revamped lately. And Storyline Online is really great books read by some celebrities, some other people. I think they're getting a lot of people to read them now. And so we can see A Bad Case of the Stripes, read by Sean Astin. And I've been using this site since I started teaching, like well over a decade ago. So this has, 12, 15 years of books just stored on here. So it's a really great resource for any student. All students love hearing stories. You can also go to YouTube and find books. I went to YouTube, got the URL for Duck for President Read Aloud, and then I went to SafeShare TV and put the URL here so that it would be it wouldn't be blocked if your school has YouTube blocked. This is a way to be able to watch audiobooks or hear audiobooks and get around that firewall for YouTube. So it takes away the ads and distractions and makes it safe for students. Other things we can take a look at is having students just practice seeing what they're saying. Or saying what they're seeing, rather. See, I need to practice it myself. So taking art and photographs and wordless books and just talking about what you're seeing. Be descriptive, go into detail, really help them build that vocabulary. And practice taking information from other media formats and talking about it in English, in text, in long streams of prose. So one thing we can do is we talked about Google Arts and Culture. That's always an option. If we look here, we can say, let's go into the White House. What do you see here? I used to do this. This was my students' favorite room when we used to do this activity. Oh, I thought it was going to take us. Hold on. Well, their favorite room was the blue room. And they loved going through, but see all the different textures and colors and shapes and directions. And this is such a just treasure trove of vocabulary you can talk about. It's really helpful for students. And wordless books. Wordless books are fantastic. We're going to talk about it in a minute with some of the non-print texts, but it's not always, technology, and this is the technology class. So how do we put a text spin on wordless books? Well, we don't have to because someone else has. The Arrival is a beautiful wordless book by Sean Tan, and someone has made it into a beautiful YouTube video, and you probably won't be able to hear the sound. It's an instrumental piano. But this is a wordless book, and someone has animated it. So it's just a different way to interact with the same information in the same text. And then in the last session, I showed you what's going on in this picture, but what I didn't show you was what's going on in this graph. And in this graph, we don't know what's happening. We know what the labels are, we know what the numbers are, we know what the key is, and it says how much do people spend on engagement rings, but now the students need to tell us the answer to that. So like, what's going on here? What are people spending on engagement rings? What are most people spending on engagement rings? What are the fewest people spending on engagement rings? And have students kind of get an idea and think it through. Just like what's going on in this picture, at the end of the week, they will post the answer and we could talk through that with students. But again, have students interact with content and information presented in different media and different formats, and that's another way to do that. The last anchor we're going to take a look at is number 9, and it's analyze how 2 or more texts address similar themes or topics in order to build knowledge or compare the approaches the authors take. So one way we can do this is by using one of the many stories from around the world websites there are. If you Google it, you'll find some. Ask your ELL teacher, ask a bilingual teacher. I could email you a ton more if you email me and ask. But there's a lot of ways to see, like, how do people, let's see, here's Aesop's Fables, here's, oh, there we go, fairy tales. So here's Cinderella. Here's all the different versions of Cinderella. You could read those and compare and contrast that. The next one I want to show you is called Perspects. And this is a really cool website that shows you 3 sides to every story. And it's from the saying, there's 3 sides to every story, your side, my side, and the truth, right? So this website presents a topic, and I will say that it is a British-based website, so sometimes the articles or topics skew heavily British to where they wouldn't be much use or interesting at all to American students. But what we can do is, let's say I want to talk about, let's go to sports. Let's pick okay, we got a lot of soccer going on. Okay, so could Messi leave? The greatest player in the world could be moving. And so what you'll see is 3 different approaches. So one is the quote-unquote neutral background. So here's that article, background to the case. Then you're going to click here, and here's going to be an article that they pulled from somewhere that takes the no side or the con side. There's going to be an article that they pulled from somewhere that takes the yes side. And so we can see how the pro and the con side differ from each other, but also differ from the neutral. So this is a really great experience for older students to do, to kind of dig into that. And then they can start to do their own. They can say, all right, let's write background, let's write a pro article, a con article, and practice taking those perspectives themselves. So those are some resources for Anchor 9. I know this session is a little bit longer. It's probably the longest one you'll have the whole course, and we're almost done. So I'm going to walk us through a couple resources and help you understand your technology application product for this week, and then we'll be ready to move on. So the big question is, how can we support ELs in reading as they acquire English and scaffold up to higher levels without losing the integrity of the content? We don't want to dumb down the content, but how can we make that, how can we have this happen? And don't worry, there's no worksheet. But what we need to do is change the text. So if I take a look at this text, I will help us out a little bit. This thrilling text on trench warfare. I could see if I gave it to students whose first language is in English, who didn't grow up in the United States or don't have parents who are well versed in World War I, this is going to be really difficult to understand. So what can I do? I'm going to need to adapt the text. How do I do that? Well, I use one of the tools I saw earlier. I'm going to copy the text I want to adapt. Go to www.textcompactor.com. I'm going to move this up to 100, paste my text in there, and then I'm going to move it down. Maybe I want it to be at 65 this time. And then I can go through and see what, excuse me. Then I can go through and see what the differences between this are. Does this one still have the same message? Does it still have the same vocabulary words I want my students to have? Is the syntax better? Are the vocabulary choices more appropriate? I need to make that call. Maybe I say, that's not enough. I need it at 40. Or maybe I need it here. So to go from this to that, for a student who's new, this is still going to be pretty hard. They're going to need some visuals. But it still gives me a jumping off point. So now I can take this to make my leveled reader. And so I'm going to come back, and you can see examples of where I've adapted this text. I did the same process you just saw me do. And I actually like showing or housing my adapted text in Google Slides because I think it's really easy to kind of see all of the versions at once. If I need to print these texts out, it's very easy to print from Google Slides to say, I need the original copy, I need this first level of text, I need a second simplified layer of text, and so this is just sentences with a picture to support and kind of help that student make sense. But like I said, if I have newcomers, they might not even be ready for sentences yet. They might just need the picture and some labeled keywords before we can even start to read any kind of word or sentence. So you have to know your students and know what they are ready for. So what tools do we have for adapting text? Well, we saw a text compactor, right? We saw Canva, the graphic design, right? Where you can make infographics and timelines, right? If I can take a text that's all print and give it some visuals, that's a win. Another thing we can use is Newsela. They have leveled versions in there. That may give us a jump start. The other thing that is helpful is Simple Wikipedia. And I know not everyone is in love with Wikipedia, but I love Simple Wikipedia because it's designed for people who are learning English, which is great. So simple Wikipedia articles use basic English vocabulary and shorter sentences. And so they really help us understand, help our EL students understand a concept that they may not otherwise understand. And so this is how I used to use simple Wikipedia, is every year, one grade of my students had to write a music report on a strange instrument. And so I was the one who was tasked with trying to find information in a level of English that they could read about rare instruments. It was not easy, but simple Wikipedia was really the only place that I could come to, number one, find out what the instrument was myself and get an article that was at their level. And so this is a nice place to start. Again, it's a jumping off point. Copy and paste a paragraph, make the changes in there. It's way easier to edit a few things than to write something from scratch. So make sure you're using all the tools you have available to you. And then in here are some adapted text samples if you want to take a look at. So this is a mystery example. So here's the first page of the mystery, again, housed in Google Slides. Here's it leveled 1 time, 2 times, and you can see the other visual supports coming in. Now the keywords are bolded. Keep going. Now we have a lot more visual supports. We have a picture of an investigator, and now we have color coding. So the vocab words have been color coded, and then we've also color coded the in-text definition of each word. So what is a suspect? Well, I got to go find the other yellow piece of the sentence. Oh, it's a person who has done something bad. What's evidence? Oh, evidence is the proof that helps solve the crime. This helps students understand the words, but also helps them get into the habit of going back in the text and finding those keywords. And so take some time to look at some of the other adapted texts here. I think we have trench warfare, but here's another one about a cactus. They might give you some guidance when you're doing your technology product. Your technology product this week is to create leveled text. You need to create a leveled text that has at least 3 levels. And once you've created that level text, however you want to create it, you're going to add it to our library of adapted text so that now we'll have a big library that we can all borrow from. So I put the first 4 in, and you can take a look at the other ones I have made, and they're adapted in different ways. The mystery ones here, this is a different one. This is, sometimes you have those leveled readers that are just to practice one consonant sound. This is Sam Loves Snow, and how I adapted it was I took little emojis and put them over the words to help indicate to the student what that word means. So just a simple way to adapt it. So you're going to add yours to the big list of adapted texts. If we look here at your directions, you have to create an adapted text to use with EL students. It has to have at least 3 versions to support students at different ELP levels. And you can present it in any format you choose: Google Slides, Google Docs, Words, PowerPoint, infographics, any kind of digital book creator. And it doesn't have to be long, like Sam Loves Snow is not long. But try adapting a text that you're going to actually use, right? If you're going to spend the time doing it, use one that you're going to be able to benefit from later. Maybe one of the ones that your students have trouble with every year, take the time to adapt that one so that when that story comes along this year, you have some extra support for those students. And then once you are done, you're going to post it in our adapted text library. And then we're all going to have access to them. So that's what your technology product is this week. And then you're going to reflect on the process of creating an adapted text and whatever tool you used to create your adapted text. There is no Flipgrid this week. It is just adapted text and the reflection of the adapted text. So now that we've digressed, let's go back and finish today's session. So quickly, I just want to introduce you to the world of non-print texts. Who can use non-print texts? Everyone, especially our English learners. What are non-print texts? So we know a print text is a text that has words on it, right? A non-print text is something that we interact with, something that has meaning and something that we extract meaning from that doesn't have print, that doesn't have words on it. So some examples are art, music, maps, the theater, wordless books, videos. All of those things are non-print text, right? And they're equally important to reading development because we don't just do reading skills with print, we do it with art, music, movies, right? We're always predicting what's going to happen in a movie, right? That's a reading skill, but we do it in venues other than with text. Where can you find non-print text to enhance English instruction, or instruction for English learners, rather? So again, Google Arts and Culture, great place to go for that. You can walk through the Hall of Mirrors, you can see great exhibits. And then this, if you'd like to explore Google Arts and Culture more, the next few slides take you through just a little exploration, a guided exploration of the features of Google Arts and Culture. So that's going to be your decision if you want to go through this kind of guided tour of Google Arts and Culture, but it's up to you. Again, New York Times Learning Network, you can go through and take a look at this if you'd like, but we've already talked about it. New York Times Learning section also has picture prompts that you can visit. And so knowing that all these resources exist, when do non-print texts communicate, entertain, inform, and persuade in the same way as their print-based counterparts? So when does that happen, right? Well, it happens when we structure it that way. So the last thing I've included in here, the last really big resource, is the non-print strategy matrix. And so this is a strategy matrix I've created where you see you have reading skills, literacy skills on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis you have non-print text. So photography, music, videos, like and including film and theater, demonstrations, so like people doing something, art, murals, and comics, and wordless books. And so if I'm a teacher and I'm saying, I need to talk about character development, but I want to use some, I want to use comics. So then I can just go to this little square here, and it's character thought bubbles. And then I can go into the strategies descriptions and find that one. If I want to talk about comparing and contrasting with wordless books, I can do that with Spot the Difference. Sometimes you'll see it'll say close read lenses. That refers to these that were created by my colleague Michelle Yanong at the Illinois Resource Center. And this is like a close reading placemat where you pick a question for the first reading, you pick a question for the second reading, and you pick a question for the third reading. So the first one is about main idea and details. These are all about craft and structure. And these are all about semantics. So you can take a look at that if you'd like. Other wordless resources you can peruse and may come in handy for your technology integrated final project is here are some wordless videos for problem solving. So they kind of pose a problem and the character figures it out. And then also just a list of outstanding wordless books. Okay, so at the end of all of this, why even bring in non-print text to this talk? How does it help to facilitate language development and content learning, creativity, and critical thinking? Well, we do know there is well-documented research benefits. There's greater comprehensible input. You're using language in a more natural context. Students have a lower affective filter with non-print texts and enhanced motivation. And at the end of it, that's what we're looking for when we want to instill the love of reading and really help students become literate in English. We want them to be motivated and be comfortable and non-print-text are a way to do that. Okay, thank you for joining me on this journey into technology and reading development. Again, your assignment is an adapted text and turning that into the adapted text library and then doing the reflection. I will see you in our next session where we will talk about blogging with ELs.